Hello and very warm welcome. You're watching the Wire Wrap. I'm Sravasti Dasgupta. Almost 2 years after an uprising, Bangladesh has now a new government with the BNP winning the elections and Tariq Rahman heading the new government over there. The United States District Court has formally accepted the guilty plea of Nikhil Gupta, who's an Indian who has been charged in the transnational assassination plot of Sikh separatist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun. And the AI summit in Delhi has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. Meanwhile, former Prince Andrew was arrested briefly yesterday and he's since been let go of in connection with allegations arising out of the Epstein Files. So what does all this mean? To discuss all this, I'm being joined by Sreeradha Datta. She's professor at OP Jindal University and the only Indian national to register as a foreign election observer in the Bangladesh elections. And Siddharth Varadarajan, he's founding editor at The Wire. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get started with Bangladesh. The fact that Tariq Rahman has returned to Bangladesh after a long exile, and just to tell our viewers that he is a political dynast, which is in contrast to the movement that ran out over there, in which people were angry with political dynast ruling. But most importantly, the Jamaat has also done well, and the Awami League did not even contest these elections. So, just to start off, Siddharth, what are your first thoughts on the results?
I think the results have an air of inevitability around it, quite frankly. There was a lot of ill-informed speculation, particularly in India, as to what might happen. But it was very clear to anybody who was following Bangladesh that the BNP, as the most organized, well-established party with a large footprint, cadre, was going to emerge victorious and by a length. And so they have done exactly as people predicted. Jamaat was bound to come number two because there isn't any other organized political force, and it came number two. Its performance is much better than its historical performance in the past, but that isn't surprising because this was essentially a two-horse race. I mean, you had other smaller parties and people in the fray, but the Jamaat has managed to gain out of the vacuum that the departure of Hasina and the evisceration of the Awami League has created. So the results are not surprising, and in a way, I think you're right to sound a cautionary note when you said that for a dynast to become prime minister would seem counterintuitive to the spirit of the uprising which kicked out Sheikh Hasina. But I share that sense of oh God, it's back to same old. But I think that given all the possible paths that Bangladesh could have taken through this difficult transition period, delaying of election, violence, chaos, etc., what you have is a kind of orderly transition to something new. A lot will depend now on the extent to which changes that people have voted for through the referendum are actually followed through, and a lot will depend on the ability of civil society in Bangladesh, particularly students. Also, I would say feisty free press to hold the BNP government's feet to the fire, to ensure that the gains of the uprising are protected and that Bangladesh is put on a firm path. So I think that the outcome we have is perhaps the best that you could have expected under the circumstances, and it's pregnant for change or movement in many different directions. That only time will tell.
So we'll get into the challenges for Tariq Rahman in just a moment, but I want to ask you that you've been to Bangladesh this time for the elections, and you've also visited the country in previous elections as well. And our diplomatic editor, Devirupa Mitra, was in Bangladesh also for the elections, and she has done a very comprehensive piece that has come out today on The Wire, and I would urge our viewers to please go and read that story. And she writes that the new government will need India for economic collaboration, connectivity, and regional stability, but it would also need to satisfy a generation that has overthrown a government that believed had spent 15 years subordinating Bangladesh's interest to India's. So, will this be a challenge for this new BNP government?
Thanks. Yes, absolutely. Because while we've seen that even before the election campaign started, BNP was making all the right noises. And once Tariq Rahman returned in December, there was absolutely no note of discord about India. We talked about Bangladesh first, which is certainly natural. I mean, I don't think one can pick holes in that. They have always conveyed, all the BNP leaders, including Tariq Rahman, that India is an important country. They would want to work with India. And at this point of time, when Bangladesh is facing economic issues, and this is not just now, it's happened during Sheikh Hasina's time, and I think interim to some extent was able to have a handle over it, but of course they needed a lot of support, so India can come in here very robustly. Now I think the job for Tariq Rahman is actually to convey, and as he mentioned, there's a youth bulge there in the, and who have, for, as you mentioned, for 15 years held this very, arguably kind of a initial frustration, anger, all kinds of things piled together and against Awami League, but that naturally gets clubbed with India, and they feel a lot of things happen which was could have been avoided, whatever. So India is, I think, in this last so many years of watching Bangladesh, this is the worst phase where I've seen the kind of angst about India, very social media driven, because I think the media has been much more responsible. Some of the talk shows, of course, yes, but largely if you see many of the mainstream newspapers. So he has to convey, I think, in some way or the other to the younger generation that working with India is good for Bangladesh. And of course, it's good for India. It's an interdependent situation. But how he conveys that and how India is, and I think I would actually feel that cricket diploma thing which happened just few days before election could have been really avoided, because that's another aspect that youth relate to so much, and they said, oh, there India goes again. So I hope we don't send different signals. It was very good for the foreign minister to go for the funeral, but then this debacle happened. So different signals are not right, and I hope right now that we've gone there, and also our foreign secretaries met the Jamaat Amir, which has been a breakthrough moment, I would feel, because we've never done that in the past. So I'm hoping that we move out from that. Of course, it's going to be, need to work basis, sectoral basis. It can't be the old Shonarodhaya, as you used to say. But I'm hopeful. But I think the challenge really will be for the government, of course, to stabilize and all of that. But so far as India concerned, to convey to its own people that working with India is a good option.
And because you mentioned about the coverage in the mainstream media, which has fueled a lot of anger in the youth, especially in India, particularly, we have also seen that the mainstream media's reporting of every event in Bangladesh has been from a particular lens, which tries to, in a sense, say that even the uprising was fueled by the Jamaat or fundamentalist factors, and there has been, in the interim government's period, there has been a consistent focus on the targeting of Hindus and the violence and the role of the Jamaat in essentially. So with the Jamaat now recording its best ever show in a parliamentary election, what does that imply for Bangladesh and for India?
I think that one should set aside scaremongering and be decisive about it. You see, all the narratives that were promoted, and to give the devil his due, I don't think the narrative of Bangladesh being a communal tinderbox and Hindus being kind of on the brink of genocide and so on was emanating from the highest levels of the government of India. I think you had people in the BJP who were happy to play along with that narrative. But the government of India's response to the uprising against Sheikh Hasina was one of just covering its backside, quite frankly. They had stood by her against all advice from professionals, and they were stuck in a situation where Modi government's policy towards Bangladesh was kind of left in tatters. And, so there was some attempt to say, okay, fine, it's not that we went wrong, but that the dynamics in Bangladesh are such. So they were quite happy to have the media and social media and all these trolls play up the communal aspect. Although I have to say that even there, at the height of the post-Hasina transition, August, September, there was a statement by, I think, Mr. Jaishankar in Parliament where he drew attention to the fact that, yes, there have been attacks on Hindus, but Bangladeshi Muslims have also organized themselves to protect Hindus. Right? So I think that the government's narrative has been, more sober than the Indian social media narrative or the Indian big media narrative. And cricket is another good example. I mean, you had, even in the week when social media people and right-wing trolls are baying for the blood of Shah Rukh Khan and Bangladeshi cricketers, etc. You can have India attending the funeral of Khalida, and you can have Vikram Misri meeting the Jamaat Amir. Because, India as a neighbor, as a responsible neighbor, knows it has to deal with the reality that is there, right? And so the government is engaging in dealing. But the problem is that the government's hand sometimes gets forced by them looking over their shoulder at what right-wing commentary is saying, right? So this is the big danger. So the question that you're asking about, the earlier question about the trajectory, can Bangladesh manage? A lot depends, as Radha said, on how Mr. Rahman, leads his government at this point. He said the right thing so far. A lot depends, however, on how India conducts itself. And I think India needs to perhaps go the extra mile to reassure the people of Bangladesh that what we want is a relationship of equals. What we want is a relationship where India and Bangladesh, Indians and Bangladeshis talk to each other with respect, where there is no attempt to run down or paint the other side as evil or infiltrators or termites. This kind of language has rankled with people in Bangladesh. And I think that it's important that the Modi government send the right signals, put a stop to this kind of anti-Bangladeshi rhetoric, and move swiftly to repair the damage on the cricket front. All of these things are very important. The Jamaat, it's emerged as the second biggest party. I would say partly, you may agree or disagree with me, but I think that I would blame India for this in the following sense. BNP was one of the parties that did not want the Awami League to be banned from participation. They were conscious of the fact that if Awami League is knocked out in any shape or form, then it's going to be BNP versus Jamaat, and Jamaat is going to gain, right? BNP was onto something. Government of India should have been onto something as well. They should have facilitated the emergence of Awami League minus Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh. In other words, but as long as you are protecting Hasina, letting her speak, letting her engage in provocative rhetoric, the natural process of churning that ought to have happened, introspection that ought to have happened among second rung, third rung Awami Leaguers in Bangladesh, where they say, okay, we need to draw a line under what has happened. Sheikh Hasina was authoritarian and people have rejected her. We need to think of a new Awami League 2.0 without the taint. And it should have been possible, maybe it's still possible going forward, but India has to not allow Sheikh Hasina to use Indian territory to disrupt that process. I'm not saying she should be handed over. These are complex matters.
No, but you don't hold press meets.
Exactly. I mean,
you don't encourage such things.
Just like the government of India does not encourage the Dalai Lama to, despite India-China relations not being very good, right? But the Dalai Lama is not encouraged to engage in his political rhetoric, right? So I think the same rule should be applied to Sheikh Hasina. Let Bangladeshi politics evolve. In due course, you will have new forces that will rise. Maybe the student party will emerge. There will be checks and balances against, to the extent to which the Jamaat's growing footprint is a cause for concern. There will be a natural system of checks and balances that will emerge, but India has to play a role to ensure that that process isn't, cut short in some way.
I completely agree, because Jamaat's never had more than 12 seats individually. So the fact that while it is the only other, second party, but at the same time, the kind of rhetoric, I think that was building that up. And a lot of youngsters, of course, it's very individual basis. Jamaat has reinvented itself. And I'm going to pitch my frontline article today where I'm discussing how Jamaat has actually been able to move away from that conservative, optics. To right now, I was there during the student election in Dhaka University. I saw the way they campaigned, and even now, the way they've been able to provide services. No student union leaders used to do that earlier. So they clearly know that what is going to work. Imagine holding animal, like dog festivals and cats, something that youngsters relate to, which is not, unknown earlier. So I think they are changing themselves. But again, because we have a, preconceived notion as to how they were, and essentially we always seen Shibir as a very violent group. So I think we are hoping that things change, the politics change, the grammar of politics change, essentially.
Just to pick up from what you're saying, that hoping that things change, I think there is some also baggage about India's previous experience with the BNP government, both the two stints that the BNP government had in 91 and then again in the 2000s. So, and there was a lot of there are in fact government documents that say that India had a very that there was support from Bangladesh to Pakistan in supporting insurgents in the northeast. So, do these concerns still remain, and where do you see India-Bangladesh relations going from here, given this background for the BNP?
I think in the BNP manifesto, they have given a very clear paragraph where they say that they're not going to allow any external forces to use Bangladesh's soil for to launch any other, anti kind of. So that clearly alludes to India because nobody else would be in the play at that point of. So I really feel that having been away for 17 years, having seen that 2001 to 2006 that phase that you mentioned where was the worst for India's security concerns. And I also keep arguing the fact that the India of today is very different. At the same time, India has much to offer, which Bangladesh would need at this point of time. So, and given what we've seen last few weeks, I hope there is a change and transition into the way they see themselves. They also see themselves as a large part of the South Asian growth story. So how would that happen if you're going to play these, security games? So I think that should be another change that we see. They of course have mentioned SARC, something which we are not comfortable to hear. But I keep saying this, that sub-region was always part of the SARC Charter. We never used it effectively. BBIN, we keep speaking, nothing has moved on BBIN. So if there's some subgrouping that emerges, I think that's totally fine. But I think there's right now a kind of a moment here where I think even Jamaat has been so, I would say, extremely objective about their, ideas to work with India. So I think it's good to grab the moment, not give them wrong messages and different signals. I think one single message should go through. And also the point about people to people. We always knew what government to government relation was doing very well. Now government will argue that it's always about people. It wasn't about people for the last few years because people were getting angsty about few things which the government, which is the Sheikh Hasina government, was not listening to. So I think it's time now. It's not just about the 15 lakh visas that we issue. There are many other small but sensitive issues that people are often feeling that India has been giving them the wrong side of the stick.
And finally, before we move on from this, I want to ask you that Tariq Rahman has, since he's taken office, he's been speaking about building a new Bangladesh where every religion is respected, everybody must come together, building a sense of solidarity and trying to move away from this fundamentalism that has kind of reared its head in the last few months. And also there have been reports that have come in today that he's taken a slew of measures like reducing the number of cars in his convoys to give a message that this is not the Sheikh Hasina government that was booted out. So I was reminded a little bit of the Arvind Kejriwal government when he first came to power in Delhi, and there was a lot of optics around this that I'm going to move around in a Maruti car and there will be no government vehicles and all of that. Do you foresee this sustaining?
I think this is a response to the kind of Gen Z perception of politics, right? So I think one message from the uprising was that people don't want these larger than life leaders who lord it over you and who have exercised power and privilege directly and through their family and their extended sort of associates. So if Tariq Rahman is responding to that, it's like, this is very good. On the question of erecting a Bangladesh that respects all its people, it's nice to have a leader in South Asia speak in this kind of language. I think it's nice to have that.
Also, I just want to add, the day the results were coming out that evening, when it was looking like it's going to be a BNP win for sure, I saw the way the families were gathered around the BNP office. I mean, I've never seen this earlier. Like children, parents, all of these contestants were there. So it was made a very, very social kind of a thing, which wasn't the case earlier. The leaders kept to themselves. And the fact that Tariq Rahman again went to both the NCP, one of the leaders' house, and also to the Amir. I think earlier we've never seen Bangladeshi politicians meet each other, forget socially or any other way. Even now I think that's again there's a new environment, and they're certainly responding to the Gen Z because every time I met somebody, youngster, especially at the polling stations, we want a corrupt-free Bangladesh. That's the first thing they would say. We want checks and balances, accountable, transparent. So all of that is it's a big thing. It can't happen overnight because there is a DNA issue in South Asia. But I think intentions of this government seems pretty on the right side.
And I can't resist making a final point. I mean, you have Hindus who were elected on the BNP ticket. You have 2 Hindu ministers in Tariq Rahman's government. That's 2 more than you have Muslims in the BJP-led, in the Narendra Modi-led, government. So it's
But
this
very
holier than thou
difficult.
attitude that India has, that India is a paragon of secular values, and that everywhere else is going in some different direction. That's not quite accurate.
So let's move on to India's ties with the US now. What's happened this week is that a United States District Court has formally accepted the guilty plea of Nikhil Gupta in the foiled plot to assassinate US-based Sikh activist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun. Now, this has sharpened the diplomatic challenges for India with the US, especially on the back of the tariffs that have been imposed on India, as well as the trade agreement, which is still in its interim form, and we don't know when the final agreement will come through. But just to tell our viewers that Gupta has pleaded guilty to 3 federal counts: murder for hire, conspiracy to commit murder for hire, and conspiracy to commit money laundering in New York, with sentencing scheduled for later this year. Now, what kind of consequences do you see this having for India and the Modi government?
It's complicated. I think a lot will become clear when we see the sentencing. If the guilty plea that Gupta embraced is part of some kind of a deal that we don't know about, and this results in a more lenient sentence, or perhaps, I'm just thinking, although it's very, very unlikely, some term, some kind of a sentence where he has to serve his time out in India. You will have a sense of whether there is actually a deal that's been struck. And if a deal is struck, then obviously the US would have extracted a price. If a deal has not been struck, the US still has the opportunity to extract a price, because the conviction of Gupta is not the end of the story. We know from the indictments last year that Vikas Yadav, who was a serving official in the Indian intelligence agency, RAW, has also been named and indicted. The US, to the best of my knowledge, has not formally filed an extradition request yet. That may follow. Perhaps to preempt that, India got this Yadav chap booked on a criminal offense. And it's possible that one legal response would be that we can't extradite him until the entire processes are complete, which may take many, many years. But the fundamental issue is that the Modi government, for better or worse, has handed Mr. Trump leverage at a time when Trump is using every bit of leverage that he can have to force India to do various things that he wants them to do. Already on the trade front, he is dictating to a sovereign nation that takes pride in strategic autonomy which country it can buy oil from, which country it can't buy oil from. And all kinds of other demands are being made. All kinds of other commitments are being sought from India. So this is just one more element in the mix. We don't know, as I said, it's kind of, this could play in a couple of different ways, but I don't see an ending of this drama that will be a happy ending for India right now.
So the Modi government is yet to put out a formal statement on this, but do you see this, as Siddharth is mentioning, that will this remain a sword hanging over the Modi government's head, especially with the tariff issue and Trump making it a point to mention every other day that he has stopped the war between India and Pakistan? His count keeps increasing with every statement. So where do you see this going?
I think by now the Modi government's internalized that Trump is not the reliable friend that it had expected him to be. So that break has of course come through. I wouldn't know whether it's a sword, but it's also, in the international community where you're always talking about your values, your civilizational issues and all of this. And also on this particular issue, completely in denial. And not that I don't expect a government ever to stand up and say, okay, guilty as charged. But I think these are, again, extremely delicate issues. And I think what I would agree on this, that gives another country the leverage that you didn't want to hand over. But that's exactly how it's going to be.
Let's also talk about the AI summit that took place in Delhi this week, and that made news for all the wrong reasons, starting from Galgotia's university that received backlash for showcasing a Chinese robot as made by its own center of excellence. Wipro has also drawn scrutiny for a similar robot. Those who attended the summit, you must have seen on social media, reel after reel has shown the mismanagement, how crowds were pushed out of the halls for the Prime Minister's event on the first day. And also traffic mismanagement has even led former British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to make a statement that AI can fix many things, but perhaps not Delhi traffic. So now there's a conversation about there's too much focus on all this chaos mismanagement instead of the actual outcomes of the summit. How do you see this?
I mean, that's inevitable. It's unfair. I think those who believe the AI summit has accomplished positive things, and I'm sure there are many positive takeaways, are bound to feel a bit miffed. But then that's what life is, right? If you organize an event with sort of public spectacle in mind, I think that we have to take a step back and ask, what is it that the Modi government and Prime Minister Modi wanted to get out of this summit? If they seriously wanted to put India on the AI map and show, demonstrate India's position as a serious player in AI, perhaps even a third pole, because there's a lot of disquiet about US-led stack, US stack, China stack, and that there's need for other countries to come up with alternatives. If that was the aim, I think we would have organized a very different kind of an event. This event seems to have been organized with a view to, as are virtually all of Mr. Modi's events, personal projection of the government, overawing the public of India with this sense that the whole world is dancing to our tune, the whole world is at our feet, dekho dekho kitna bada tamasha kiya humne. So you've organized this sort of event where you've had a huge footfall, haven't done the logistical hard work for ensuring the orderly flow of people, ensuring smooth traffic flow, ensuring that basic things like exhibition items not getting stolen. So it's inevitable that it's these sob stories that are going to dominate the headlines. And the Galgotia fiasco, I think we still haven't got to the bottom of. I think tough questions need to be asked, because this is not just the case of one university misrepresenting and trying to hoodwink people with getting a Chinese robot and passing it off as their own. Galgotia has a certain relationship with the government. The government has promoted Galgotia and other private universities at the expense of public sector universities. I saw an item, I think, in today's Express about the space, exhibition space given to Galgotia being more than 4 IITs put together. So, there is a sense in which the wider political economy of this government sort of education, technological policy, the promotion of, I would say, for want of a better term, crony firms, and the projection of, you have this toxic mix of the cult of personality of Mr. Modi, crony capitalism involving favored players. No matter what they do, they can bend all the rules. They get given prime space. So this is bound to come together and create negative optics. It's unfortunate, and I hope that many of the AI companies that came, many of the scientists, technologists who came to India will still have left the country, will still leave the country with a sense that that India is a serious player, serious contender. But if they do that, it would be, despite everything that the government has mishandled.
Also adding to the what's happening at the AI summit is that today NSUI protesters went in and there was a bit of a demonstration where some people were seen without shirts, and then the Delhi police has taken them away, not really helping the case of the AI summit. But also interestingly, what's happened is that Bill Gates' participation was a huge question. Is he going to participate? Is he not going to participate? His sources close to the government told government news agencies, if one can call them, that he's not going to be participating because of the disclosures in the Epstein Files. His Gates Foundation said that he will, and eventually he did not. The impact of the Epstein Files, meanwhile, has been felt on the British monarchy as well, with former Prince Andrew. He was arrested yesterday and then he was let go of, and of course the allegations arising out of the Epstein Files. The Starmer government is teetering on the edge with the revelations out of the Epstein Files. Do you see Andrew's arrest related to that? Is that a consequence of that, or is this a decision that flows from Charles saying 6 months ago that law should take its own course?
No, I think that Andrew's arrest in many ways was inevitable, given the kind of information and disclosures that have come out, right? Because on top of the sordid, the sort of the sexual allegations, right? which are sordid and criminal and awful. On top of that, the latest files also suggest that he abused his authority as a trade envoy and shared information with Epstein. So, so I think that the full range of allegations is such that it would have been very odd for there not to have been a police investigation, given the way that Britain works, given the way that you have a separate, in a way, the king doesn't control the police day-to-day functioning, and so when he says the law will take its course, I mean that's the way you would expect most people in Britain would expect things to happen, which is very different from in this country, where we know that if you're powerful, more likely than not the law will not take its course, and the contrast is striking because here, I'm not suggesting that everybody named in the Epstein files has the same degree of culpability or liability, or clearly Andrew is in a different category. But if you look at people in the UK or the US or other countries who were named in the files for essentially networking with Epstein, right? Not being involved in his criminal activity, just for networking, right? But networking with somebody who you knew was a pedophile, was a convicted pedophile. And so many of these individuals have felt compelled to apologize to the victims. Many of them have resigned, many of them have stepped back. And there's a sense in which if you are working in a particular institution or government, protecting the reputation of that institution or government is paramount. And so many individuals are falling on the sword, even if the extent of their culpability falls far short of anything that Andrew is accused of. In India, you have nothing of the sort. You have one minister named, you have a leading businessman. In fact, I would say the Anil Ambani disclosures, which the Epstein file suggests that he or somebody was approaching Epstein as a representative of the PMO and Mr. Modi, right? So you would have thought that the government of India would have a special incentive to get to the bottom of who these individuals are who are passing themselves off in their dealings with a pedophile as a representative of Modi. And I'm sure that these people have broken the law, broken Indian law by this kind of misrepresentation. But you see no attempt by the government at all to deal with these disclosures in a serious manner, and no expression of remorse by either Mr. Puri or Mr. Ambani. So it's really, India emerges in its handling of the Epstein files in a very, very shabby way when you compare what's happening in other countries. I think that this is really quite striking, and you can imagine if more files come out and more details come out, what's going to happen.
So final question before we wrap up is that Siddharth is mentioning that India is standing very on a different note compared to other countries. We have the minister who's not shown any remorse. He's addressed press conference. The Prime Minister has wished him happy birthday as if nothing has happened. And there's a leading businessman, of course, and his emails are also a point of contention. But with all this happening all over the world relating to the Epstein files, even Donald Trump is under a lot of pressure from his own party as well in the US. Is the Indian government not feeling any pressure?
Even if they are, they're not going to show it to us. It's going to be business as usual kind of a format. But in a country where people sitting in the jail are winning parliament seats, you see how powerful people can get away with plain murder, right? I mean, all kinds of accidents on the road get washed away because you've just been able to pay off some people. So everything is a chalta hai mode in this country. So I really don't think there'll be, and in all our daily humdrum of the Indian civil society, I don't think we put pressure for these aspects. We are so busy on our day-to-day existential problems that this doesn't become, in a country like UK, it's a different matter altogether. And but I think here we'll soon, some new other controversy will come up and we'll forget about this.
Sravasti, this is the government that released gang rapists in Gujarat, right? The people who were guilty and were serving time for the gang rape of in Gujarat. Were released on Independence Day. They were Bilkis Bano, they were feted, they were welcomed, they were garlanded. You have examples of so-called godmen convicted of very serious crimes being released on furlough repeatedly and then going and campaigning for candidates linked to the ruling party. So, I don't expect, if you look at this government's track record, obviously they they don't, they operate on a different moral, platform than ordinary people or normal people. And I would imagine that they should have some concern and care for India's global reputation, because it's a bit much that when you see around the world individuals, institutions drawing a line and saying, okay, we're not going to allow ourselves to be tainted by association. It's a bit upsetting that India wants to be wants to stand out in refusing to acknowledge the need to do anything at all.
And it was similar during Me Too as well, and MJ Akbar was only removed much later when the pressure became unsustainable. All right, so we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much to the two of you for joining us and to our viewers for watching.